If you play the saxophone or just enjoy seeing how amazing things are made, you're gonna love watching this entire video. I recently visited the Selmer factory in Nantes-la-Ville, just outside of Paris, France, where they have been making some of the world's finest musical instruments for over a century.
Hey Jay!
Laurent, ça va?
Ça va bien toi? Bienvenue!
Merci!
You're about to come along on a fascinating journey where we see how raw materials are transformed into beautiful music-making tools using a mixture of the latest modern technology as well as traditional hand craftsmanship. You may have seen my recent video where I toured the Yanagisawa saxophone factory in Tokyo, Japan. One thing that they have in common is both factories are located in residential neighborhoods. I was quite surprised to see how different the rest of the saxophone making process can be though. This year I also had the opportunity to visit the Yamaha saxophone factory in Hamamatsu, Japan. And guess what? It's a strikingly different process there as well. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss out when I post that video soon.
Cette partie-là qui s'appelle la chaudronnerie.
This is Florent Millot, the saxophone product manager for Selmer Paris, who's going to show us around. The process of making a saxophone begins with sheets of raw brass. In this room, they store the raw materials for making the various parts from scratch. This is a high-tech laser cutter which precisely cuts out the shapes needed for each part. Kind of like a cookie cutter, but for brass. This shape will become 2 halves of an alto bell. This one becomes 2 halves of a tenor bell. This shape becomes an alto bow, this one a tenor bow, and these will be necks.
Ça va être un corps de ténor.
Over here, we've got the cutouts for alto and tenor body tubes.
Et la perce des corps n'a jamais changé. On est sur les mêmes perces depuis...
It is very interesting to note that this shape has remained consistent. All Selmer saxophone body tubes have the same interior shape and volume going back at least as far as the balanced action from the 1940s. The fundamental differences from one model to the next are in the necks, bows, and bells, as well as the tone hole placement and tone hole chimneys, which we'll see in a moment. Alto and tenor saxophone bells start out as a sheet of brass which gets pressed into a mold by this huge machine.
On n'ajoute pas de l'étain ou de l'argent, ça se fait vraiment en fusion des deux parties de métal.
The 2 bell halves are cut from the mold and then fused together using argon gas, rather than traditional silver solder. Selmer says this special process preserves the homogeneity of the metal. Now the smaller end of the bell gets trimmed to its proper length. This next part of the process is fascinating and begins with liquid tin being cast into these rings of various diameters.
En fait, ce rond d'étain, il s'écrase sur le pavillon, sur un mandrin, ce qui permet de lui donner sa forme. Alors on vient positionner notre pavillon, tac, en force.
The fused bell is then placed on a mandrel and the tin ring is pressed along the length of the bell, creating the exact shape for each model saxophone.
Sur le pavillon. Et voilà. Parfait. Et un pavillon de plus. Un chariot de pavillon d'Axos.
Another important thing to point out is that all the main parts and components of the Selmer Axos instruments, their entry-level professional model, are made in the Paris factory. It's the assembly that is done by their foreign partners, very much the same as Selmer did with the legendary Mark VI, which was often assembled at partner factories in the US and the UK.
Bonne route.
Merci.
Ironically, the Mark VIs that were assembled in a foreign country are considered more valuable today than the ones that were made entirely in France.
Ici, et on va rouler le pavillon autour de ce fil.
Next, the bell flare is rolled over a brass ring in the same way it has been done for over 100 years.
Ça, c'est un pavillon de baryton.
A baritone sax bell is made from a single piece of brass that gets folded around its mold and soldered together. The final shaping of these has to be done by hand.
Ça, c'est un gabarit de basse.
Selmer Paris is one of the few manufacturers of bass saxophones in the world. A bass sax bell is made in 2 sections that are also folded around and then welded.
Ok, merci.
The bow is made in a similar fashion. 2 halves are soldered together. A lot of handwork goes into getting the final shape just right.
C'est des culasses.
These alto bows are getting trimmed by this large machine.
Tac, tac, on découpe.
Real quick, this video is not sponsored by Selmer, but it is sponsored by you watching right now. Your support is what allows me to continue making great saxophone content like this. To the many folks out there who enroll in BetterSax courses and purchase our saxophones, mouthpieces, reeds, and other accessories, I want to say a huge thank you. I couldn't do any of this without you. After this video, be sure to head over to BetterSax.com where we have something for every saxophone player at every level. Our gear is designed by saxophone players, specifically for saxophone players, and our courses have helped tens of thousands of students level up their playing while having fun in the process. Now let's get back to the Selmer factory. Unlike the body tubes, each model of Selmer saxophone neck is unique. This is the part of the saxophone that creates its individual character. We start with a single sheet of brass that gets folded into a tube and soldered together. These straight tubes need to be bent, and the ice makes it easy. Unlike the saxophone bells, which get finished from the outside, the necks are placed into a mold and liquid is then blasted inside at high pressure, giving them their final shape from the inside out. Body tubes are also made from a single sheet of brass, which gets folded in this machine. Once the tube gets soldered together, it's time to cut holes in it, which is done by that very large, modern, and sophisticated machine you see in the background. Tone holes used to be cut as circles, and then the chimneys would be soldered onto the body. In 1922, Selmer was the first manufacturer to use the technique of pulling tone holes on saxophones. Here's how it works. These half spheres are first placed inside this mandrel. Then the body tube is put in position and a machine pulls them through the oval cutouts. Which results in a perfectly circular tone hole chimney. Once the large components of the saxophone are made, it's time to start attaching a lot of small parts, all of which are made in this factory. These huge rolls of sheet brass are fed into this high-tech machine, which cuts out countless small pieces. This is what a keyguard looks like before it gets bent into shape, for example. Other small parts like pivot screws, hinge rods, and body posts are also made by the thousands. Now it's time for us to walk back to the other part of the factory where the assembly happens.
Depuis quand c'est ici?
1919. Tous les saxophones Selmer ont toujours été fabriqués dans cette usine. Toujours.
Every Selmer saxophone has been made in this factory since day one. The complex key mechanism of a saxophone is fixed in place using these key posts. This machine zaps the posts with an electrical charge, which holds them in place temporarily so that they can be more easily soldered to the body.
Que là, si je force, je peux enlever les pièces.
This worker is using tin solder to attach the parts to the saxophone body. The bells and bows get soldered together here as well. These two bass saxophone body tubes have just come out of the soldering stage. Once the posts are attached, the alignment is fine-tuned. As you can see, the soldering process has discolored the metal quite a bit. Everything needs to get cleaned up, and that is done using a series of chemical baths. If you look closely at a saxophone, you may notice that there are a lot of small moving parts. Each one is unique to the model, and they are all made here at the factory. Hundreds of different small brass mechanisms that need to be worked by hand to get that smooth to the touch finish. In this part of the factory, keys are made using machines that have been in service for generations. Now it's time to polish everything up. These machines are huge vibrating baths of corn and resin. The keys go in and get a nice first stage of polishing. And in this section, everything gets polished by hand. And it comes out looking like this. Next step is applying the lacquer. In this room, parts get a final finishing polish immediately before they go on these hooks, which carry them through the lacquering room on a hanging conveyor belt. The lacquer gets sprayed on with these pistols. Next up is the engraving. If you've seen modern Selmer saxophones, you may have wondered how they get such intricate designs engraved on their instruments in minute detail. Well, here's your answer. These high-tech engraving robots can work around the clock and never get tendinitis. Here's another futuristic robot that performs multiple operations on each saxophone. For a perfect key fit, this machine first measures the exact distance between the key posts and then trims off a precise amount of metal from each key. Then it levels and files down each tone hole to its ideal height. Now our lacquered and engraved saxophone parts are ready for assembly. At the first station, this worker installs the needle springs. And he adds the left-hand thumb rest before this body tube moves along. Now it's time to glue the pads into their key cups using shellac. Selmer has the exact dose of shellac for each key prepared in these ready-to-use discs. First, the keys get heated up. When that light turns green, the metal is hot enough to melt the shellac. This worker is lifting the pad up to ensure that the shellac has melted and spread across the key cup evenly. Now the pad gets held in place while the metal cools. The final assembly takes place at several stations like this one, where one worker puts together and regulates an entire saxophone. Applying lubrication to this side C key, now she installs the hinge rod and adjusts the mechanism until it operates freely. As you can see, this G-sharp key is binding slightly and needs to be adjusted. Done. Checking that the installed pads are sealing properly. And now for the bell keys. Once the saxophone has been fully assembled, set up, and adjusted, there are several playtesters who verify that everything works as it should. The final stop on our tour is the shipping room, where finished Selmer saxophones get put in a case along with their included accessories and then boxed up, ready to be delivered to distributors and dealers around the world. Selmer is a legendary company that has been making extraordinary instruments for over a century. Along with that legend, though, there comes a certain amount of rumors and hearsay that aren't based in facts. I hope what we've shown here today helps saxophone enthusiasts understand what actually goes into making a Selmer saxophone. The mixture of cutting-edge technology and old-world manual craftsmanship is striking and at the same time exciting to see. I learned a tremendous amount making this video, and I hope you did too watching it. Now you gotta go check out how they make saxophones in Japan. You may be as surprised as I was to see how different the process can be.